So good morning guys and welcome to Washington Wetland Centre. So my name's Kirsten, I'm one of the keepers here, so it's my lovely job to look after all of our animals that we have here, and that includes our gorgeous flamingos. So we have a group of 56 Chilean flamingos, so quite a large group. Our youngest is 4 years old and our oldest is 42. Now in the wild these guys can live from around 30 to 40 years old. In captivity it's a little bit longer, so it's around 50 to 60. However, the oldest captive Chilean flamingo is currently 83 years old and still going really strong, so these guys can live for a pretty long time, which is obviously really good for us and good for the birds as well. Now these guys are from South America, so you'll find them in places like Chile, Argentina and Peru. They have the largest wild populations of these guys. And probably the first thing you notice about these lovely birds is that lovely bright pink coloration that these guys have. So a lot of people think that flamingos are born pink, but they're not. They're actually born a lovely whitish greyish colour, and they develop that pink colouring depending on how much feed that these guys get in the wild. So these guys eat shrimp in the wild, and shrimp contain a protein compound called beta-carotene, and that gives these guys that lovely pink coloration. So the more food that they get, the pinker they become. It does take them quite a long time to be able to fully develop that lovely pink colouring. So you'll notice the majority of our flock still have a really sort of pale neck and head, and that is because that is the last part of a flamingo to get that beta-carotene and to actually turn pink. So it's actually a pretty good way to be able to roughly guess the age of a flamingo. We actually currently only have one that is fully pink and who has that lovely fully head and neck, and he's our oldest and he's 42. So it's a really good way to sort of be able to guess that age as well. So these guys in the wild live in habitats called salt lakes and mud flats. So these guys live in really flat environments with lots and lots of salty alkaline water. Now that water is really important because not only is it a really good sort of breeding ground for the shrimp, which is the food that these guys eat, but also it means because of that water, a lot of other animals do not want to live in that environment. To them, it's disgusting, it's minging, they don't want to go near it. So it works out really well for these guys because they pretty much have a habitat to themselves in the wild. So these guys are quite a unique bird for a couple of different reasons. And a flock of flamingos is called a flamboyant, which is very fitting for these guys because they absolutely love to show off, especially during breeding season. So it is currently breeding season for these guys. It's normally around August, September time. And these guys in the wild will have to do a couple of things to try and attract a mate in the wild. It's really important that they try and do that as early on as they can. So these guys are a monogamous bird, so they do mate for life, so they want to try and get a mate as early as they can. So to do that, they'll do a couple of different display behaviours. So one of the things that these guys will do is what we call false feeding. So they will scoop that lovely black part of their beak to the surface of the water. They'll sway their head left and right so they can have a look behind them to see if any of the birds are showing a little bit of an interest in them or checking them out a little bit so they know sort of roughly who to go for. And one of the other things that these guys will do is they will spread their wings as wide as they possibly can so they can show off that lovely pink feathers that these guys have. Now we know that the pinker a flamingo is, the more likelihood and the more food that they can get in the wild, so the better sort of hunters they are. And that also means that they would be really good at providing food for any future chicks that they have as well. So that coloration, as long as looking pretty, it also does help them when it comes to finding mates as well. So when these guys actually do come to breed, these guys will spend around 98% of their time in the water, and they will actually only go onto land when it comes to start going through all of those breeding behaviours, things like building their nests. So they don't spend very much time on the sort of land, which is why we've got that lovely island in the middle for them. it means that they have a lot of free space to be able to start their breeding behaviour. So we are starting to see a lot of them come onto the island a little bit more frequently in the past couple of weeks, which is really good because it means that they're going through all of those lovely behaviours that we want to see from them. Now these guys have had to be able to adapt how they actually build their nests and protect their chicks in the wild because of where they're from. So because South America gets really long rainy seasons, because of where they live in a really flat environment, they can get lots of flash flooding, which can then destroy nests. So these guys have built what we call a volcano nest. So it normally sits at about a foot tall, and they'll use a mixture of mud, sand and water to try and make it as compact and solid as possible, so that if they do get any flash flooding or high amounts of rain, that egg is best protected. Now, one of the reasons why they go through all this effort to be able to best protect the egg that they lay is because these guys actually only lay one egg a year. So this is a replica of a flamingo egg, so it's the same weight, shape, size and colour of what a real flamingo egg would look like. And because they do only need the one, they go through all of that care to make sure that it is best protected. Now, a baby flamingo is called a flamingoling, believe it or not, which I think is obviously the best name for any chick ever. So yeah, they want to try and protect that the best that they can. And both mum and dad will spend equal amounts of time not only incubating the egg, so sitting on it, making sure it is nice and warm and ready to hatch whenever it wants to, but they'll also spend that equal amount of time feeding it and looking after it as well. So they are really good when it comes to parental care and looking after their flock, looking after their chicks. You will tend to find as well a lot of the older birds within the flock in the unit will actually help to look after the newborns and the chicks as well. So they are really good at looking after each other. They love to spend, obviously, they only really spend a lot of their time with the same sort of species just because they don't really come into contact with a lot of wild animals in the wild. So one of the things that these guys are, unfortunately, it's a little bit of their downfall, is those really long, thin, nimble little legs that they have. So these guys, because of how thin their legs are, they have really poor circulation in them, and they have to try and protect them the best that they can. Now these guys do spend so much time in the water, so those legs can get really cold really quickly. So one of the things that these guys will do, which you'll notice pretty much a lot of the time, is they'll be standing on one leg, and they do that so they can tuck that leg up under their wing because it's the warmest part of the bird to keep them nice and warm. And then they do something which we like to call a little flamingo two-step, so they'll start hopping from leg to leg to try and keep those legs really nice and warm and protected the best way that they can. Now, one of the other things you'll probably notice about them is it's really difficult to spot their eyes. Now that is because these guys have extremely poor eyesight, they can barely see a thing, and they also have extremely poor hearing as well. So we spoke a little bit about how the fact that in the wild these guys don't really come into contact with many other species because of the environment that they live in, and that suits these guys pretty well because they don't blend in very well. They have that really poor eyesight and really poor hearing, so they don't really need to protect themselves from much. But unfortunately, as sort of we're going through the sort of the hotter seasons with climate change and things like that, these guys have actually been classified as near threatened in the wild, which is one step away from becoming vulnerable. So, and that is mainly because of climate change and because of the areas that they live in. Those areas can dry up because we're getting hotter and hotter summers for longer periods of time as well. So these guys then have to try and find a fresh water source where there are a lot more dangerous predators out there, and because they're not very good at protecting themselves, they don't blend in, and they have that really poor eyesight and hearing, they are quite easily picked off in the wild. Now, we try and do as much conservation for these guys, just like we do with our otters. So we work with a lot of conservation charities actually out in South America to help protect the wild populations, and our group are totally free to breed as well. We are hoping in the next sort of year, we've not had a successful egg born here in 5 years, but that is because these guys are extremely picky. If it's a little bit windy that day, if we spot a little shadow, they will not breed because they're so intelligent. If they don't feel safe at all or if anything spooks them, they just won't go through that behaviour. And that is all because of that poor eyesight as well, so anything can freak them out. And over the next sort of 12 to 16 months, we are actually going to build an aviary over this enclosure to hopefully help boost their sort of safety and how they feel, and hopefully we'll get some eggs next year. We are fingers crossing. But we do have that lovely flamingo house at the back there as well, So if we ever needed to, we can lock them inside. It's all temperature controlled and it also is UV controlled. We also have a lovely freshwater river system that flows through that house as well. So if they do need it, if it gets a little bit cold like it does in the northeast of England during the autumn and winter, we can lock them in as well and hopefully promote some breeding behaviours. So fingers crossed for next year. But we wouldn't be able to do any of this conservation, especially working a lot with conservation charities actually out in South America, without the help of you guys coming down and listening to us chat a little bit about our animals, because it means that we can continue to do that and hopefully get ahead of the curve and prevent these guys from being classed as vulnerable in the wild. So thank you so much for coming down. Does anybody have any questions, or would anyone like to hold the flamingo egg before I head off?